Perfect. All right, well, over to you.
Okay, I can see participants arriving. Alex, do you? Okay.
Just let me know when you want me to share screen, okay?
Yeah, we can share the screen with the first slide. So
okay. Yeah. All right.
Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome to the first public lecture of AI ethics through design. Apologies for the small delay. We were having technical issues, but hopefully we are able now for everybody to hear us and see us. The AI ethics through design is a design brief, a collaborative design brief that the design school of LCC is running in collaboration with IsITethical exchange. And the details of the brief are in the IsITethical exchange website. Or for the students and staff of the university, you can see it in the Moodle. And I'm gonna be the first presenter. I hope with this lecture to frame you and what we mean by ethics through design, and also help you to get ideas of what can we, how can you respond to the brief. The brief is very, very open. It asks you to design a tool for supporting ethics of AI. And what we say tool, we have a very, very broad idea of what a tool is. I also want to introduce Jenny, who is supporting the project and the program of lectures. We have 5 more lectures all happening on Wednesdays afternoon. You all will need to enroll in the same way that you did for this one in Eventbrite. For the students and staff of the LCC, we have 3 in-person creative workshops, but you don't have to attend the lectures or the workshops in order to respond to the brief. And of course, you can come and engage with us even if you are not responding to the brief. Jenny, who is working with me in this, is a user interaction design that have expertise in healthcare sector, and she just finished her master's in service design, and I had the honor to supervise her. And she did her master thesis in ethics of AI, and she developed a very interesting tool for collaboration. Also look at her profile. We're gonna put the links later here, and the presentation is recorded. And the videos are going to be both in Moodle and the IsITethical website. And this, all sort of this, work for these public lectures and all the upcoming lectures. So I'm going to start with my lecture and introduce myself a little bit. I imagine, Alex, can you change the slide? I imagine many of you already have seen me, and I have taught the research methods unit last term, and I teach in the MA of Service Design. I'm running the collaborative brief with the service design students, and this talk is called Ethics Through Design. I'm also the co-director of IsITethical Exchange. That is a research hub that we run in collaboration with Lancaster University. And yes, I'm gonna talk about ethics through design. The next slide, please. So the aim of ethics through design is use collaborative design methods and tools and ideas to support contextual and participative IT technology of ethics of technology. And I'm going to talk about this because when we say ethics through design, we both problematize ethics and design when we put them in the same equation. So the lecture today is going to be about how we problematize both. Can you put the next slides, please? I started working in IsITethical, and my own work as a designer have been exploring these connections between design and ethics. And I developed my practice working in the domain of risk management and disaster response using the next slide, please. Using different methods that include ethnography, play, speculative research, service design, knowledge exchange, and collaborative design. And even though our domain and our sector looks like that, can you put the next slide, please? My projects and our work looks more like that. So with these methods, we create ways in which people could agree, could develop a common language, and could take decisions that support more responsible innovation. The next slide, please. In this lecture, I'm going to talk about our context of why it's so necessarily to do ethics through design. I'm going to go a little bit philosophical and explain what we have called from the chain of value without loss to the value constellation. So the first part of the lecture is a little bit philosophical. And then we are going to talk about the relevance of collaborative design and thinking about concept of pluriversal ethics. And I'm going to close the lecture giving or sharing with you 3 principles for how to design these tools that support ethics and responsible research innovation. So even though I start with a very philosophical and theoretical part, towards the end, it becomes very practical, and you can get things that you can actually apply. I will close with a provocation. That is my own takes on all of these topics. That is less ethics and more politics. And for each color of the slides, I'm going to take about 5 minutes. So you can follow my presentation. The next slide, please. So let's start with the context. In the last year or so, AI ethics and AI have been in the mouth of everyone, social media in general. A lot of issues have been highlighted, from the pollution that AI innovation creates to issues as discrimination, political manipulation, and in general injustice through the implications of new technologies. The next slide, please. Responsible research innovation is a kind of multidisciplinary new discipline that has been trying to answer to these issues. And they are a struggle because, first of all, the issues are global, on a global scale, and the issues are formidable. So disciplines from anthropology to sociology to people that do ethics and people that work in computer science are trying to achieve this in the innovation change of production and standardization and adoption, and they are struggling with the wicked problem that these issues are. The next slide, please. So we are entering in a crisis of crises, or better say, in a crisis of ways of managing crisis. So the way that we managing crisis is not working anymore, and we see implications of this everywhere, every day. The next slide, please. And this is only showing the collapse of the system of managing people, resources, and environment. And these systems are not just technological systems, but also human systems. And so it's not just like the fault of the new technologies, but also the fault of who create and manage new technologies. The next slide, please. And so we entered in the philosophical part of it, and we have thinking about this kind of collapse and an unnecessary change of logic. So I'm going to talk about change of value and value constellation, but let's go in parts. Let's go first to change of value. Next slide, please. So we kind of start thinking about the chain of value and how this inform ethics from the times of Descartes and the Cartesian system. And this is so relevant because it creates calculus, it creates the scientific methods, it creates science as we use today and understand today, but it will also create the separations of disciplines and the separations between, for example, mind and body, and the separation between different substances, all the classification systems that we understand today, to start the separations of time and space and how to calculate this without human error in a way that we can repeat every time, and every time will take the same results. So the next slide, please. According to Descartes, we have three main substance, and the primary substance is God, or is the beginning of all things. And then we have res cognitas, that refers to logic or a way of thinking. And then we have the things that we do, matter, or the techniques, that is res extensus. So what Descartes says is that there is a line, that arrow that you see from there, from God to a way of thinking that is human independent, that is universal, that is we can achieve with the scientific methods into the things that we create. So if we use science to think, everything that we create, it will be ethical because it's aligned with our laws that come from God. The next slide, please. I want you to pay attention to that line that now I make pink, so you kind of visualize it. This division or these classifications of substances, what basically gave to the West is this distinction between metaphysics and physics. And ethics, actually, because the ethics is maintained into maintaining that pink line, so that direct connection between the primary substance, or what is God, or what is the authority, or what is good, into the things that we create that are not complicated or by the human passions or human feelings or humanity, but it comes through calculus and it creates into things. What is interesting about this kind of little diagram that I did to understand the Cartesian system of logic is that if we rearrange all the elements, can I have the slide, please? We're going to have something like this. And this looks a lot like ethics of technology. So the ethics of technology is guaranteed or is based on this pink line. And this is the objectivity that science gives us, is the logic of the technology that we produce, and it's the direct line or chain of value without loss from the primary substance to everything that we do and we create. The next slide, please. And what is techne and what is logic? But in technology, the techne is what we can touch and what we can see and what it works. And the logic is how that technology have embedded in itself some way of using it. For example, when you get a hammer or when you get a pencil, you know instinctively why is it good for and how can we use it for. I mean, you can use the hammer to hammer babies, and that would be very unethical, but it wasn't created for that. And it wasn't used for that. And this is not the logic that is embedded in the object. The next slide, please. So we're talking that in the chain of value, ethics is given by this line or chain without laws that come directly from the primary substance to the techno and the logic of that techno. The next slide, please. So that's what we call the principle of value chain without loss. And it's that chain that we're going to talk about. The next slide, please. Let's exemplify this to try to be less abstract with an example of the Mona Lisa. The Mona Lisa is created by Leonardo da Vinci so many years ago and is kept in the Museum of Louvre in Paris. And in order to maintain it, it needs certain amount of atmospherical conditions, temperature, humidity, light, so there is a whole investment of science and technology to maintain without loss this painting as similar as Leonardo created. So we have the primary substance, that is what Leonardo da Vinci created, and how we see it now. The value of the Mona Lisa today actually relies that the painting is intact. It haven't been lost any of its value because it's intact. So this change of value actually needs to be greased. It needs to be maintained. It needs also be maintained with material things, like I was talking technologies of maintaining, but also place in its museum. And also all the narratives that are around. For example, the value that a lot of people go to Paris only to see this painting, and the people queue for it, and what it creates, like the pride of own the painting, etc. So the next slide, please. So the principle of value chain without loss is that we can maintain this change of value so it doesn't lose its value until from subset to subset until the moment that we receive it. And the first subset is the authority, is the primary, is God, is Leonardo da Vinci. And the last subset is the person that see the painting as Leonardo imagined. Oh, I don't know if he imagined he would be in that museum, to be honest. But that's how the change of value works. So each subset gains something and gives something. You invest on the maintenance of the Mona Lisa, but you also give the experience of the Mona Lisa. So each subset gain and give at the same time. So there is no loss. There are other systems that work with this change. Actually, many systems that work with this change. I imagine you can think about examples, but one very important is, for example, the university. I have a department, I have a school, and the UAL in general contract me to teach my students, and by the end of it, they will have a degree that have certain value because all the value have been transferred without loss. And what's the grace of that change? The grace is that I will prepare my classes with certain principles of how to standardize knowledge. There are meetings, administrative process I have to follow, teams I have to follow, line managers, and so on. So there is a whole structure maintaining this chain. So the final product, that is your degree, is very valuable. That's an example of another example of value change without loss. The next slide, please. So what happened when the technology start to reproduce itself so very quickly and so very fast. When the technique start to accelerate, the production of the technology start to accelerate, it becoming so big that unbalance this formula. And it changed our logic, how we think about reality, how we think about information, how we think about technology and things around us, how we think about people. So the technique, when they accelerate, it change and mess up with this whole balance and changing our logic. And actually interrogates what is ethics, because the relationship changed into a constellation, no longer is a chain. Can I have the next slide, please? So the principle of value constellation is the principle of exponential thinking. It's the exponential logic. And it's no longer like one subset gave and received value from another. In the value constellation logic, when the most value is going to generate it with one subset, connect with as many subsets as possible. The next slide, please. So let's put this as an example. I went to the Museum of Louvre and I went to see the Mona Lisa and I took a picture and I share my picture in Twitter and Instagram and all my social media and in WeChat. And my picture, my best friend made a meme of it, putting my face on the face of the Mona Lisa. And that meme was viral, and that meme was re-edited and re-edited and re-edited all over the world, from Africa to Singapore, until we have the meme of the Mona cheetah. So the value of this meme is not about maintaining the original picture of Leonardo da Vinci, not even maintaining my own experience in Paris. It's about all the connections that it did until it created another meme. So the value is no longer in preserving the loss, but the value is on the maximum possibilities of connection. The next slide, please. And this is what we have. A constellation is something that is not steady like a chain, but it actually is dynamic, and it changed form and it changed nature. It's no longer one subset connected with one, but one subset connecting as many as possible. And it's also not just about connection, but it's about disconnection. Some of these subsets could be simultaneously in different places. And also in this diagram, we lost who is the center, who is the primary substance here, because this will change shape. It's a three-dimensional moving shape. And when you stand in one network or constellation, you will see different things. So different things may act as primary or as the authority. So there is no linear continuation of what can be ethical, or who say what is ethical, or who say what is good, or who say what is bad. So that line is totally messed up. And I think this is why we are trying to find other ways to do in ethics, because that direct connection with God is no longer what is our reality today. Next slide, please. So yes, this transformation in logic that is product of the technology is making us rethink about ethics. What is ethics? The ethics of who? How do we know what is ethical? The next slide, please. And this is very complicated in Western philosophical terms, but it's actually very familiar with the people that do collaborative design practices. We know that when we do a design, we have to think about the affordances of these designs, depending on the perspective of different stakeholders and different actors within that systems. We really know that we need to connect and sustain collaborations with as many actors or human and not human actors as possible within that system. So this is some conclusion that we could arrive through philosophy or actually through design. This is something that we can understand very well, and we can work very well on it. The next slide, please. So in the domain of technology, in IsITethical, we work together because of this with end users, or the people that use the technologies that are designed, that also collaborate in between them. Next. Data subjects. So where is the information come from? How these little subsets within the constellation are portrayed and perceived, and how do we create or avoid vulnerability within that constellation? The next. We work with industry or the people that actually create and develop these technologies. The next. We work with policymakers and organizations standardize and inform adoption of new technologies. And in this sense, the work of collaborative design, when we work cross-sector, cross-agency, cross-border, is very in line with the idea of value constellation. For us, it's no longer, design is no longer a change of value. We actually mess up with all this investment in greasing that chain, and actually invested by including other actors. And now we know that things like inclusion, diversity, and testing the things from different perspectives is the way of producing more ethical and better design. The next, please. So I'm gonna give you some examples of how me and my team in IsITethical have been developed this idea of ethics through design, and is moving out from this idea of ethics as an administrative process, of ethics as that little office that was in the industry that says the project is going to be ethical, and after that is never checked again, and the product must be ethical because 3 years ago the ethical office says it was ethical. So it's no longer a chain. We work with different peoples with different perspectives in a very dynamic way. The next slide, please. But this way of working using design in ethics is also interrogating design itself. So this way of applying design to technology, it moves us immediately from the user-centered design to the next slide, please, to a more collective way of understanding design. How it's no longer about this user working, this white male user working in this little computer in the little office, but how technologies are affecting the grandfather and its son that walk in the park with its companion pets. So it's a more than human, multi-species, and actually thinking about context and sustainabilities of this system much more. So it's trying to account for the full constellation rather than from a change of value. I produce my system that's going to be used for this person, and there is no consequences outside of that chain. No, this is a more constellationary way of thinking, and account for also creativity, instability, emergencies. The next slide, please. So this really questions ideas that are very fixed in ethics, like privacy by design or security by design. Next. And actually make us think, whose ethics is it? It cannot be the ethics of the scientific. It cannot be the ethics of God. Whose God is that? The one that was in France in the Cartesian times. The next, please. Or can we look at more, rather to have a primary substance as the thing that will dictate if our things are good or bad, but actually start thinking about the relationships that we create with things. The next. And we're kind of thinking about, rather than preserving privacy and protecting people separately to each other, we're thinking about the concept of policy. So how is it when we are connecting with as many subsets as possible, where we are multiplying the value? So how can we preserve policy rather than preserve privacy? The next one. And can we find around the world other ways of thinking about ethics, other ways more attuned with the environment, with nature, with others? Next. There are examples, and it has been a very big inspiration of IsITethical work of indigenous framework of technology. And there are examples that imagine technology in a very different way than the West is imagining. Can we imagine other types of ethics, how people do ethics beyond philosophy, but for example, how people put ethics in practice? By discussions, by rituals, by connections, by singing, by arts. The next one. So how can we bring back the aesthetics part to the ethics that was separated in that diagrams of Descartes? If we're messing out with Descartes' formulas, how is that aesthetics can start informing ethics? So in this one, I think our role as designers and art researchers and practitioners is huge. I'm sure we can all, with our own practice, can start thinking, how can we support ethics? The next one, please. So we have some examples of things that we have developed in IsITethical, where we concentrate on creating what we call etiquette. And it's this using creative practice to think about contextual participatory ethics. The next. So you can visit the website and we have created a framework of key terms to kind of find definitions for some of the key terms that are shared in many frameworks, ethical frameworks, and also guidance of how to develop and standardize and make policy for new technologies, not just artificial intelligence. Next. And yeah, we tailor kits to support ethical conversations across industry and users and stakeholders in general of these systems are constellatory. The next. We have sets of cards. The next. We think about embody ethics and perform ethics, mapping ethics, using different elements to connect people. The next. And this is a little dance that we create as a ritual for artificial intelligence ritual. We developed this with Mozilla, and it was a dance, the next, that we did through Zoom. And it was thinking about, rather than thinking and agreeing on ethical values, we're now kind of embodying it and feeling it with our body. So with this experience working with different industries and different sectors, we have come up with 3 principles that help us when we are sitting in the draw table, when we are starting a new project. We work with 3 principles in mind. The next. So the first principle is a principle of art thinking. And it's based on the book of Maria Acaso and Clara Mejias. The book is in Spanish, but you can find a talk in English in the website. And the principle of art thinking is, how can we use creativity, art, and design to think about problems in a different way? The next one, please. So we use creativity, we use game, we use visuals, we use colors to provoke. We have props to provoke conversations and to start calling and start surfacing things that are hidden within this system. The next one. The next principle is the principle of engagement. and it's based in our readings of Paulo Freire. And it has to do with, it's not just about putting people to collaborate, it's about how can we do for these collaborations that are actually meaningful. And Paulo Freire was key to understand power relationships in a moment of collaboration. Who has the louder voice? How can we voice to those who we can not normally hear? How can we offer a space for those ones who don't have a space? So how can we support collaboration with a sense of justice? The next one, please. And these are some examples of workshops that we do. The next. This is a picture of the ritual I was mentioned before that we did in Zoom, but we are also have using like storytelling and comics to, for example, do creative consent forms that are actually more accessible to other people. Next. And the third principle is principle of anticipatory ethics. And this is that always our tools and our workshops and our interventions are future oriented. So we're thinking what will be the context in the future, and how this anticipation make us a little bit more aware of what we need to do today in our deadlines, or what are the goals of the project, but how can we think about this in the future in a timeline bigger than us, but also how can we go from the project to a societal, a planetary levels? How can we think about these impacts? And this is where we apply methods of speculation and anticipatory methods. The next one. And these are some of the games that we have developed with this idea of a thing in the future. Rehearsing future scenarios. The next one. And that means that the frameworks that IsITethical do are ethical frameworks tailored specifically for a context, rather than that talk in general about artificial intelligence frameworks. The next. And the next. So just to close now, I think we live in a society that actually trade you some benefits and some comfort for the erosion of civil liberties. So we are manipulated, we are humiliated, we are alienated, discriminated, because we have the comfort or the facility of certain functions, of certain technologies. And I think what we want to do in IsITethical is mess up with this trade and not seeing like a fair trade. The next one. And I think it's now just beyond beyond design and beyond ethics, but more into politics. So I actually thinking that I'm gonna close my presentation now. Because we started a little bit late, and I actually want to hear from you if you have any questions. But before I close the presentation, can you go through the last slide? So if we are thinking about ethics through design, connecting with communities and constellations, acknowledging other ways of understanding realities. Can you go to the last slide, please? Yeah, this is in, yeah, no, the one before. This is an invitation of thinking together to develop the concept of ethics through design. I mean, this is something that has been developed in IsITethical with a research team of various disciplines. But I'm interested in how other designers and how art practitioners can think about this as a concept that can be explored, and how it's useful to actually do ethics together and supporting the politics of AI ethics. So thank you very much. And I'm now opening the floor for questions that I hope to answer, but if I cannot answer, at least let's think about it together. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Molly, for the insightful talk. So now we have 15 minutes for the question. Feel free to type in the chat, or you can put your hands up by clicking the raise hand buttons. Okay, Molly, so we have a question from Ada. Could you develop the concept of policy a little bit more? How is privacy and protection conceived in policy?
Yeah, the concept of policy is we were thinking a lot about privacy and how many of the systems in which we are functioning now are not private, and actually the value of being or becoming part of the systems is not the privacy, but actually the opportunity to connect with others. For example, the value of the Zoom in which we are connecting now is not Jenny's Chinese name, Taiwanese name is hidden. It's actually Shujin, so there is some of her privacy is revealed, but the value of it is that we can be together and I can answer your questions. The same is, you could find it in social media. The value of the social media is no longer to preserve privacy, but actually to connect with many people. We were doing some research with teenagers about the ideas of privacy, and none of them see it as a problem. They see it as is their opportunity to be heard, is their opportunity to connect with others, and that is a much more important value than preserving privacy. So we were thinking about privacy as one subset of that chain. So what happened when that subset, thinking me or you, can connect with many people as possible? It's not just, it's a way of becoming with them. We lost in the connection, but we also gained so much more. So the value of connecting with many, that is what I could call policy. And how can we design to preserve policy? And for example, how by not preserving policy, we enter into problems. So imagine all your profile pictures is usually one picture of you, yourself, separate from everything that is important to you, separate from your natures, your country, your values, your family, people that depend on other. So how is that can we support the design of technologies that allows for these connections to be visible and meaningful? That is what I mean by policy. But by the way, this is a concept that I invent. So you can take it and re-edit and rethink about it, or we can think together about that. So thank you, Ada, for your question.
Yes, we have another question from Luke. Thank you for the talk. Could you talk a bit more about the reaction industry partners have to your approaches to ethics?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. I remember the very first workshop that I did was in Brussels with the Minister of Defense of many countries that were trying to think about the ethics of a cloud to share data for emergency situations in Europe. So half of the room were male, over 50, and the other half were military. And I arrived there with big boxes of colors, trying to use arts and design to think about ethics in a very different way. So the first reaction of industry partners or policymakers or standardizations is, oh, we didn't know that you can do ethics. We thought that designers come to the project to make a beautiful website or something like that. So you're gonna make our thing more beautiful or make it more accessible. Now people are interested in making it more accessible, but actually supporting ethics is something that is always perceived with resistance. There are other issues of working with industry, like industry are very pressed by the market. Who is the first one that come up with the next advance on it? They are also working in secrecy, obviously. So we don't have access when working with industries. We don't have access of many of the aspects that may make the products unethical. But also it's not their purpose. People in industry are in a timeline trying to deliver a very specific outcome. And it's actually another role to think about what is the impact, the planetary impact in 10 years' time. They actually need to produce this for tomorrow. So there is a tension there, because we all what we have is always the same reaction as, oh, this is that you're proposing is very, very interesting, but it's not our domain. So we have called it that it's not our domain syndrome. And I think ethics in this way has to not be a domain, but actually a responsibility for all, not just designers or policymakers or people that use the technology, but all our responsibility. And maybe designers have a role in make everybody responsible about more caring futures.
Thank you. And we have another question from Katie. If we wanted to work with people across the courses or work with people from different backgrounds, is there any connections or any way that we can do it?
Interesting question. I'm assuming you are an LCC student from a course. I don't know if you are undergraduate or postgraduate, but maybe I will create a space. No, this is what I'm gonna do, Jenny. We can do this. We can create a space in the Moodle where people that is looking for a team can sign in, and maybe put something about you and you're looking for a team, and maybe they can use the space to connect with each other. I hope that's useful.
Yeah.
I also see Anna is writing that the chat is disabled. I think the chat is disabled, but you have an option of Q&A. This is where we are reading, we are reading the questions.
Okay. So another question, what do you see the main difference are between ethics through design and ethics by design and responsible design?
Oh, okay. So ethics by design is usually where, if you think about a chain of value, one of these subsets is the ethics. For example, ethics by design is when you have a system, let's call it a computer, let's call it an app, any system that stop any malicious interaction. What's the problem with ethics by, it usually is security by design or privacy by design. What's the problem of all of these systems that in the design stop certain interactions that are malicious? First of all, you need to think about what these malicious interactions are and try to imagine it and prevent them. But then you will create a system that is less agile, that stop you to do things rather than make you think what is better for all. So we ethics through design try to move out from ethics by design by supporting ethical conduct rather than ethical products. So it's more about how can we support ethics amongst the people that is creating and developing and innovating, rather than making a product that in its design, it does something. And then is responsible design. Responsible design usually are those designs that within the system integrate a possibility for the user to respond to it. So think about Wikipedia. They propose a definition, the user can respond to it and shave it, make it bigger, expand, or respond in any edit down. Or so responsibility it refers to the capacity of the users or the other stakeholders to actually change the design. Again, Tom, this is how I understand it. And this is all for discussion here.
Yeah, I think due to the time limited, we still have some question, but let's do another last one question.
Let's have the last one, Jenny.
Yeah, the last
The
one.
last one. Yeah, yeah. We're a bit late.
Could you talk a little bit more about the relationship of ethics and your projects?
The ethics and my projects. All the projects that I shared today were about ethics. So those are workshops, tools, dynamics, exercises that we did among groups of people that were trying to support the ethics in their projects. So we do games, tools, workshops, cards, dance, storytelling, because they contact us, the IsITethical Research Hub, and they wanted to support the projects, the ethics. I hope that answer.
Yeah, we still have some interesting question, but yes, we come to the end of the section.
I have 1 minute more. Can we just try answer that one in 1 minute? Which one is?
I think there's an interesting one. I am a student of MASD. The metaphor of dancing with the trouble of AI is very beautiful. So you transfer concept into bodies to explore and embody value. May I ask how the workshop of tail gesture is carried out?
Yes, that was workshop that we did via Zoom when the pandemic started. So we were all just starting to use use Zoom for first time. So we wanted to explore first the affordances of the Zoom screen. So how can we feel more connected or disconnected if I move into the Zoom? And then that time also coincided with a lot of webinars about ethics of AI. And we wanted to do something different. We wanted people to stand up, move around, and vibrate in each value. So we work with a musician and different people that work with their bodies. We have a fit trainer, dancers, martial arts, but we also work with people doing like science fiction and future studies, and we come out with a movement for each value, and we ask people to repeat it in their own ways. But we work with a musician that create like a soundtrack for each value as well, using like physical synthesizer. So we have like techno style music and people dance into the values. And we were hoping that rather than have a boring webinar like this one that I did today, people connect more with ethics if they dance it. And that was all very inspired in indigenous values. The 12 values that we used were chosen because they were part of a framework of indigenous values. Well, now I can see that the time is run low.
Yes. So
Jenny, do you want to add anything?
Not really. Yes, I think if anyone have any other question, can contact you or contact me through the email.
Yeah, that's
so
fine.
Yes, I will put the email in the chat. And yeah, thanks for all the attendance today. And again, thanks for our speaker, Mali. So every Wednesday from now to February 22nd at about the same time, we will have different speakers coming in for various talk. So remember to register from Eventbrite, and you can find more detail in IsITethical website, which you can find a link in the chat. So thank you all for participating today, and see you next week.
Thank you very much, and hopefully see you next week. Next week,
Yes.
We're gonna have a presenter from Lancaster, Professor Monica Butcher. She's sociology, and I'm very curious about her talk. And she's the other co-director of IsITethical, but she will give you a very different approach. So thank you very much to all, and hopefully see you next time. We're gonna open that space in Moodle for people that is looking for a partner in their teams. And we will share links that we mentioned and also in the Moodle. The recording of the lecture will be available both in the Moodle and in the IsITethical website. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. See you.